everybody, and welcome to another board game review and gameplay demo. Today we've got a Kickstarter preview for a deck building game that is all about the immune system. The game itself is Pathogenesis. In this game, all of the players are building up bacteria, making them stronger and more resistant so that they're better able to break down the barriers and fight against a host immune system in this case. As you can probably guess, the game itself is very scientific, and not only that, but it's actually very scientifically accurate as well. We're talking about all different components of the immune system being represented by different cards, and on top of that, you can also change the physical environment of the host to better suit you as a pathogen so that you're better able to infect them. It's absolutely amazing. We've got some very complex science that's been boiled down into a wonderful package in here. Now, that said, if you're familiar with deck building games in general, you will be able to pick this up very, very easily. It's pretty smooth to play. The transitions between the different waves, so to speak, are relatively smooth, but again, I'll get back to that when I talk about the actual demo and I show you how to actually play the game. The big thing for this is that it takes about an hour or so to play. It plays from 1 to 4 players, so you've got a lot of versatility, not only in the number of players, but also in how the players are sort of designated. You've got team play, you've got co-op play, you've got competitive play, you've of course got the solo play, and then within all of those, you've got different difficulty levels. You also have different lengths of time. You can have a longer game or a shorter game. So it's a really, really well done game. I absolutely love it. The artwork is absolutely incredible. So you guys will not be familiar with it, but the art in this game is actually done by a professional scientific artist, which for me just blows my mind. It's absolutely amazing. I am absolutely giddy. I cannot wait to talk about this game. But before I do, keep on the lookout for it. It's going to be on Kickstarter, on the shelf, so to speak, starting on September 28th. So be on the lookout for its page. Take a look at all the details for it, and maybe if you're feeling generous, go ahead and back it, because it is a tremendously fun game. That said, we're going to get right on ahead and started with what this game is similar to. As far as similarities are concerned, there are 3 major ones that I really wanted to talk about. The first one is scientific mostly, and that is strain. In strain, you are trying to build up a cell. You start with a central tile, and then you build up around it. You get your mitochondria, you get cytoplasm, you get toxins, you get resistance, all sorts of different stuff like that. And the idea is that once you've built it up enough, you can collect it for victory points. The other thing you can do is you can go and you can attack your fellow players with viruses of various sorts. So in that sense, it's very similar to Pathogenesis, where you are building up these biological entities to go and attack something. The major difference is in Pathogenesis, everybody is collectively attacking these 3 tracts that they are trying to infect, but the sort of heart is still there very similarly. Secondly, I wanted to mention a very mechanically similar set of games, which are the Legendary games from Upper Deck, as well as the DC deck building game as well. So we've got Marvel Legendary, we've got Legendary Encounters, Legendary Predator, and then the DC deck building game. Essentially, all of them are cooperative games where you're going and you are attacking some kind of boss-like entities or just regular monsters or whatever it happens to be. And Pathogenesis is very, very similar in that it's everybody against this particular entity, this particular group, whatever you want to call it. And I like the analogy particularly with Marvel Legendary and the DC deck builder, because you, to an extent, you know what's going to happen, you know what's coming, and you'll be able to deal with it much more efficiently. The thing I like more about Pathogenesis is the fact that it's a little bit more versatile in terms of how the players can play and how they can interact with one another as well. The last similarity I wanted to mention was with Xenoshift. In Xenoshift, it's another deck builder that progresses in a very similar way to Pathogenesis. In Xenoshift, you have wave 1, 2, and 3. And as you go through the different waves, not only can you get stronger and stronger characters, stronger and stronger cards, but you're also fighting against stronger and stronger bad guys. The same thing happens in Pathogenesis. Once you get past the regular barriers of the different tissues, then the immune system kicks in and starts actively attacking you back. and then after that happens for a while, then you get the adaptive immune system, which comes in, and that is even more powerful because it's specific for the different pathogens. But again, I'll get into all of that in just a little bit. So those are my main similarities for Pathogenesis: Strain, the Legendary deck building series, as well as the DC deck building series, and then Xenoshift for the various mechanics. So with that, we're going to get right on ahead into the actual demo for how to play Pathogenesis. Alright everybody, we're pretty much all set up and ready to start playing some Pathogenesis. In this game, the entire goal is to collect these little chips that are in these petri dishes. These indicate damage that you are doing to the body through these 3 different tracts. We've got the respiratory tract, the tissue tract, and the gastrointestinal tract. As we start collecting those, we're damaging the body, the immune system will respond. At the end of the game, whoever has the most of these will win. And the way that the game ends is when either our pathogens deck runs out, which are the various cards that we can purchase, or the immune system deck will run out, which I'll build in just a little bit. I'll show you guys how that works. Essentially, the other main thing I wanted to mention as well is that this is still a prototype, so keep that in mind. For example, these little chips that are bingo chips will not stay as bingo chips. They'll be little cardboard punch-outs with different denominations on them, and same thing with these counters and markers of various sorts. They're just going to be cardboard punch-outs instead, nice thick stock cardboard instead. But as far as the rules, they are pretty much set, but again, it is a prototype. Things may change, right? Just like with any deck builder, right now we're starting off with 3 players. We've got one on each side here and then one right in front of me, and everybody starts off with the same 10 cards. In this case, everybody is starting off with 4 pathogen cards. These will be used to either purchase new cards from the active gene pool, as it's called, or they will be used to sort of just play them down, and then we can modify them so that they'll be able to attack the body and start getting us some cool stuff, right? The other 6 cards are essentially mostly your purchasing power cards, but they can also be used as actions instead, mostly to discard cards from your hand and to get rid of certain pathogens and all this kind of stuff. You can also reset the gene pool so that you can get some new stuff, all that kind of thing. If you guys are familiar with deck builders, this is a fairly easy game to pick up and play. In this case, the other major thing that you get with each player will be a reference card, and these will indicate what the different symbols on all of the cards indicate. For example, we've got the attack and the defense, which is how you determine if you win or lose the little combats. The genetic value is how you purchase new cards, and then you've got draw, you've got trash, all this kind of stuff. It's fairly self-explanatory. And then with the turn order on the back of the reference card, it tells you what the individual phases for each round is. So this is when it's your turn, you go through these phases. Now, phase 2 and 3 will only occur after the immune system has been activated. And again, I'll get into exactly how that works in just a little bit, but suffice it to say, initially, you just do phase 1, 4, and 5, right? So across the table here, we've got all of our stuff ready to go. These cards are the different pathogens that are available for purchase throughout the entire game. Those are upgrades to your starting pathogens so that you can do more damage, they've got more defense, and you can modify them in more specific ways. One important thing to note, though, is that they do correspond to the specific tracts in general. For example, these are gastrointestinal specific, these are respiratory specific, and these are tissue specific, so those are the middle ones. These last ones here, these purple ones, are multi-point infections, which means that they can go into multiple places. For example, anthrax is an example of a multi-point infection because you can get several different types of infection from the same anthrax bacteria. And for the pathogen cards, the ones that we'll be purchasing from the gene pool, there are several different types of those as well. We've got traits, we've got toxins, we've got environments, and there's another toxin, and those are the three main types: the traits, the toxins, and the environment. Essentially, they all will modify the pathogens in some way, shape, or form. For example, here we've got the protein A, and what this does is this destroys any antibodies that are on a pathogen. Antibodies are put on by the immune system cards, and you can get rid of them with that. In addition, it gives you more defensive power. With the toxins, for example, with this one, we've got the cytolethal distending toxin, which just gives you an additional +3 to attack. All right. The environments are what modify the host, and these I find really, really interesting because it's literally things that will make us as humans more susceptible to infection. Open wound is a pretty obvious one, and then another good one is this, where you don't finish your prescribed antibiotics. I know doctors everywhere rant and rave about that, and it's true. You need to finish your course of antibiotics. It's really not complicated. It's really easy to do, right? Again, most of these cards are very self-explanatory. The triangles indicate what you do when you attack, and the pentagons, the blue pentagons, indicate your defense when the immune system comes a-knockin'. So, the way that this works with the modifications is you'll have, for example, a pathogen. In this case, I have a super pathogen gastrointestinal, and say I want this cytolethal distending toxin. What you want to do is you want to match up the arrows to one another. So in this case, this will take 2 slots, so to speak, quote unquote, and then we now, instead of having a 2 attack, 3 defense pathogen, we now have a 5 attack, 3 defense pathogen, right? Same thing with the traits. So most traits will only take up a single slot, and the way that you do that is you just line it up with the bottom there. And you just want to match up the colors. So green goes with green, blue with blue, pink with pink. The purple ones are unique because those can go with any of the pathogens. So a purple trait can go with a green card, just like a green toxin can go with a purple pathogen. Right? Makes sense? That's pretty much it for how you modify them. And again, on your turn, the first phase is when you will be playing your cards. You'll be playing your action cards. You'll be putting down the pathogens so that you can start to modify them, all of that kind of stuff. Now, the last thing that we need to do is we need to ready up our immune system decks. So there are 2 immune system decks. There's part 1 and part 2. And effectively, this is where the waves come in. So the first wave, so to speak, is with these barrier cards. So the barrier cards are very easy to defeat. They only have a defensive value. And once you defeat them, they get discarded and you get prize money for it. So essentially you get extra buying power. That's what these little chips are over here. You get buying power equal to the defense of the barrier card that you can use for one-time purchases of some of the active gene pool cards, right? Now, once the barrier decks are gone, once a single barrier deck is gone, the immune system activates and we start dealing with sort of like phase 1 of the immune system decks. Now, these are the initial responses, which include things like neutrophils and eosinophils and fever and all sorts of different stuff like that, dendritic cells and these guys. Now, the thing is, this is the innate immune system. It's not specific to pathogens, right? But these are the guys that start to attack you, so your defense comes into play once those guys come out. After this deck has been depleted, it then gets reshuffled with our deck from the part 2 or the wave 2 immune system. Now these are the ones that are more specific. This is where we start dealing with antibodies and things like that. So they will start to attack our pathogens more specifically and with a lot more ferocity, essentially. Now because of the game that I'm playing, I've got 3 players. We're playing a long game because we've got all of the little chips in here. We get 18 of each deck. Alright, so there's 18 of part 1, and then those go to the side. And then we can just shuffle those up real quick, right? And those go right there. And then we also get 18 from part 2. Right? And again, the rest go to the side. These will act as the discard pile for the part 1s. So we put those face up next to the phase 1 immune system. All right. So again, we've got sort of the 3 waves that we're talking about, where we start off with the immune system barriers that don't actually attack us, but we just sort of whittle them down, and then we go to the immune barrier number 1, or the card number 1, and then the card number 2 after that, with the card number 1 shuffled back in. The way that the game ends is when either all of the chips from some of the tracks are depleted, or all of these cards have been depleted. So we go through number 1, flip it over, shuffle it, and then go through the entirety of them all again. The game is over. Or we can go through the entirety of the pathogens deck as well. Now, depending on how many players you have, your exact game setup will determine how many tracks you need to empty. In our case, we only need 1 to be empty to end the game, because it's 3-player competitive. If you're playing cooperatively, you have to deplete 2. You can also play more or less difficult, which increases or decreases the number of immune cards. You can play the longer or shorter game, which will change the number of the little ticks in the petri dishes, all sorts of stuff. Lots and lots of versatility here. So folks, for the purpose of this demo, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it in 3 waves, kind of like the way that the game itself works, where first I'll just do a couple of turns as the attacker of these the barriers here, and then after that I'll sort of fade out and go to when the immune system starts to respond, so we add in the additional turn phases, and throughout the whole time I'll be buying up and getting all my new stuff, and then lastly we'll go into the final wave with these nasty guys over here. One thing that I did forget to mention also is that everybody starts with these little chips as well. So the first player will start with 1, the second player starts with 2, third player starts with 3, but I will be skipping those 2 players. I'm only going to be playing as this person right in front of me instead. Okay, so we've got our turn order card right here. 3, 4, 5. So of the 10 cards, we get 5 to start off with, and during the first phase, that's when we get to play our cards down. So we get to play cards either as actions, we can use them as buy power, or we can put down pathogens or pathogen modifiers to start attacking the body. So I'm going to put down an opportunistic pathogen here to start building him up. So he's only got a 2 attack. Well, he's got a 2 attack, but he has no defense at all. So it's a little bit worrisome for when the bad guys start knocking. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rest of my 4 cards, each worth 1 buy, and then spend my last little chip here to purchase one of these super pathogens. Okay, it's like a deck builder. These all get set aside. They're going to go into the discard pile later on. But first we got to go through phase 4, which is the attack phase. This is where any pathogen you have in play will go and attack the body. In this case, my opportunistic pathogen is a multi-point, so it can go into any one of the tracts. Since it's only got an attack of 2, it has to go to the respiratory though. So we'll attack that. We destroy this first card and it goes away, and I get 2 little chips as a bonus for destroying it. Because we attacked the barrier, we also flip over the next card, which is another 2. And now this goes to the discard pile face up, and we get our last 5 cards. So again, we've got normal flora this time, which has a defense of 2, which is pretty nice. So we'll put that out, and then we've got 4 available buy, plus our 2 little chips. But I think I'm going to go for this trait here, which is the gelatinase. As soon as you buy something from the active gene pool, you flip up a new card just like that. And once again, we go to phase 4, the attack phase. My pathogen will attack the respiratory system again. I get 2 more little chips, and we flip over the new card like that. Now, the normal flora would try to attack, but it can't because it has no attack capabilities, unfortunately. So it doesn't really do anything. It just kind of sits there, right? So that's it. As the barriers are broken down, that is essentially how you go about doing it. You can buy several of the pathogens down here so that you can bolster up your ranks and all this kind of stuff. And now we're going to go on ahead, and I'll talk about when the immune system activates and actually starts to attack you as well. Alright, for the sake of ease of this, I've sort of bolstered up my guys over here. I've got a super pathogen, I've got 2 super pathogens ready to go. I've also got a GI pathogen as well. So I'll go ahead and draw up my cards, and you notice the barrier cards are gone, so now we are in the part where the immune system is going to be attacking us with this first deck, right? So I've got my cards. I have an environment card here, which is an open wound, but I can't use it because it's only on tissue pathogens, which is kind of unfortunate. All right, so I will play a protein A onto my opportunistic pathogen right there. And then my gelatinase activates because I can place a +2 defense on a gastrointestinal one, so this guy has a +2. All right, now I can buy, I've got 3 buy power, and I will take a tissue pathogen. So that's 2, and that's it. Okay, so those get ready to be discarded. Now, the preemptive strike only occurs on several of the environment cards, including the open wound, with the idea being that, you know, the bacteria have an edge of some sort. And unfortunately I don't have any of that, so that phase does not occur, and we move right into phase 3, which is the immune response. During phase 3, the immune response, we essentially take one of these cards and randomly assign it to each of the pathogens that we have, and then we determine how they fare. So we'll go 1 there, 1 there, 1 there, there, and there. Right? So for my little opportunistic pathogen guy here with the protein A, so this has an attack of 2 and I have a defense of 2. If it matches, it's defeated. So this guy goes away and he will go into the trash. Right? If he had survived, he would have gotten a C3 token, which is one of these things, and it's part of the complement system. Alright, dendritic cell, attack of 4, utterly destroys my poor little normal flora. And if the pathogen is killed, add an IgG card to the top of deck 2, which is this one right here. So that means that we got to dig out deck 2 and get an IgG card. IgG. Okay. And then this guy, dendritic cell as well. So again, 4 attack, but I've got a total of 5 defense, so I successfully fended off. And then over here, complement. So this guy gets a C3 marker to indicate that complement has been activated on it. And last but not least, my other super pathogen, chemokine. Okay. And because it now has a chemokine, that means that you draw an extra immune card until the thing is dead. Because that's what chemokines do. They attract other immune cells. Okay, but now we are all free to attack as we are able to. So the super pathogen, multi-point of entry, has 1, 2, 3 attack, and we're going to go after the respiratory system. So we take 3 chips. That's 4, Danny. Our GI pathogen has an attack of 2, but it's only on the GI, so we can't do anything with it. And our other super pathogen, attack of 2, will keep pounding on the respiratory system. Right? And that's it. So that's the initial portion of the immune response. So essentially, this is where we're going to be building up certain immune issues, essentially, with our pathogens. And again, the ones that get killed, the ones that get killed, quote unquote, will go back into our discard pile. They are not trashed. They don't go out of the game. They just go to the discard pile, and then we redraw up. And again, just like with any deck building game, once we've got them, once they're in the discard pile, and if we're out of cards, reshuffle, and then we get our new hand from there. Okay, so with that, that's how those additional phases work. I will show you really quickly how it works with one of these other guys. So I had the open wound, and let's say that I had my open wound on my tissue pathogen here, right? So essentially I play it on a pathogen. The environments only count for a single turn, and in this case what the open wound is going to do is it allows me this preemptive strike with the little pyramid of triangles, essentially. And so that means that I attack before the immune system. So I have 2 attack for the tissue, so let's pretend I had more. Let's say this was over here. I have 3, so that would go away. I would get my 3 little chips, and then we'd flip over the new card. Right, I'll put that back. We flip over the new card, and then the immune system would come after me during the phase 3. That's how the preemptive aspect works of it. All right. So with that, we'll go on ahead, and I'll show you guys how setting up for the final wave works. Setting up for the last wave of the immune response in pathogenesis is super easy. Essentially what it's going to boil down to is we'll have this, our discard pile, with all of our phase 1 discards all stacked up there. Once they're all gone, we take up this whole thing and then we shuffle it up a little bit, right? So we'll take this, we shuffle them all. And again, throughout this entire time, you'll be getting new cards, more powerful pathogens, the toxins, the environments, the traits, all that kind of stuff. So you'll be constantly upgrading and getting new and better stuff, right? Or at least that's the theory. Okay, so essentially now this is the final deck for the game. Once this deck runs out, the game is over. So it's either that ends, this ends, or the tracked end, depending on exactly how it is that you're playing the game. The second stage, so to speak, of the immune barrier decks correspond to the adaptive immune system. This is the part of our immune system that becomes specific for certain pathogens. This is why after you get chickenpox, you never get it again, because you've got antibodies specific for it, so anytime your body sees it again, it knows how to kill it. That's essentially what's going on here. So this is where some of the stronger attacks are coming in, but also some buildup happens, particularly with the antibodies. So we'll get antibodies stuck on some of our pathogens, and then other things are going to come down and start to attack us as well. Just like before though, during the phase 4 or during the phase 3, we will get our individual cards on top of each pathogen before we're able to attack. So we flip these over. Right now we've got an IgG, so that just adds an immunoglobulin G to that pathogen, which can be bad because that can indicate something really nasty is coming. Next up, we've got regulatory T cell. It's only got an attack of 2, but if the pathogen survives, then it does 2 less damage. So this is essentially at a -2 attack, even though it very easily survives. Next up, we've got a plasma cell that adds an IgG, and it also forces the other players to pick one of their pathogens and add an IgG to it as well. The plasma cells, their sole purpose is just to spit out a whole bunch of antibodies. That's all they do. That is literally their purpose in life. Next up, we've got an eosinophil. So the eosinophil is unique because what this does is if there is an IgE on any one of your pathogens, it will move to that, and instead of having an attack of 3, it will have an attack of 6. So like I said, this is where that adaptive response comes in, although this is a phase 1 or a stage 1, so to speak, because it's just an eosinophil, it's not an adaptive one. But this guy is dead because it was 3 versus 3, so he would be dead and he would go over there. Now we do our regular attack. So the super pathogen on the tissue is able to destroy this, so we get that, and then we get 2 little chips. This guy has an attack decrease by 2 because of the card that it got, so that means it only does 1 damage, but we'll say it goes to the respiratory system. And this guy, again, is able to do 2 attack, but it can't do anything to the GI tract. Right? And that's it. Again, most of the cards in the immune barrier deck are very self-explanatory, so you shouldn't have any problems with them, but it's really cool because again, we start getting the different markers that will attract specific aspects of the immune system and all that kind of stuff. So it becomes really interesting, and again, very scientifically accurate, which is super exciting. One thing that didn't really come up in my little demo here is the fever cards. The fever cards are ones that you can always buy at a cost of 1, and effectively the idea is that some of the cards will change what they can do if you have a bunch of fever cards. As you guys are probably aware, one thing that we do when we're sick is we run a fever so that we can kill any bacteria. The problem is if the fever goes too high, it will damage the host, and we as pathogenesis players will use that to our advantage. So those are the 3 main waves of pathogenesis and the general idea of how to play it. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, this is a tremendously fun, scientifically accurate game, and if you are familiar with deck builders, you will be able to pick it up very quickly. It's a lot of fun, but with that, we're going to go right on ahead into my pros and cons, as well as general conclusions about the game as well. Well everybody, I hope you enjoyed my demo for how to play Pathogenesis. Now before you say anything, I know you're all thinking, Danny, what is with all this jargon? Why are you talking about B cells and eosinophils and hyaluronidase and all this kinds of craziness? And don't worry, because it's pros and con time. the top number one pro and the top number one con for me is the theme. You guys know I get drawn into theme. That is a big part of why I enjoy a game or dislike a game. And the fact is, I love science games. I especially love science games like Pathogenesis because they are extremely scientifically accurate. In the case of Pathogenesis, not only in the different components of the immune system, but also those sort of waves of how the immune system responds during an infection. You know, we've got all these different toxins that the bacteria are actually able to produce and affect how they're able to infect a host. We've got the environment cards that change the ability of the host to fight off the infection, all this kind of stuff. It's absolutely amazing. That said, I fully understand that not everybody is all about that. And again, the theme is very deeply seated into this game. It's difficult to sort of pull away what is going on in the game from the theme. It's extremely tough in this particular case. And I know that most people are just going to look at a lot of these cards and just think it's jargon, 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 jargon. And the fact is, in a lot of ways it is. But you know, some people, if you're willing to give it a try, I highly recommend it because, again, at its core, this is a very solid and fun deck builder, right? You don't need to worry about exactly what hyaluronidase does. You don't need to worry exactly what a dendritic cell does in the body. It's not a big deal, okay? It is a fun game, and I recommend that you give it a try if you get a chance, just in that sense, right? Another pro for me is the versatility of the game. Again, you can play from 1 to 4 players, you can play on teams, you can play competitively, you can play cooperatively. The solo play is actually pretty solid, and while you do see it in a decent number of deck builder games, it is very refreshing to see that amount of pure versatility in this. Not to mention the fact that you have the different difficulty ratings depending on how many of the immune cards you're adding in that you'll eventually be drawing from. The final major pro for me is one that links back to my first pro, which is about the scientific aspect, and that is the potential for pathogenesis as an educational tool. Now again, it is a very complex thing when you're talking about immunology. The fact is that there is a lot about the immune system we still do not know. We don't know how it functions, but there is a lot that we know, and the creators of this game did a wonderful job of boiling down the key points into a very solid, fun deck building game. Now again, you've got the components of the immune system, you've got how the immune system reacts, the different waves that it sends out during an infection, and on top of that, you've also got the different things that we as humans can do to ourselves and our environment that can affect how susceptible we are to certain infections. For example, again, we've got the things like the poor diet and implants and things like that that make us more prone to infection. And it's absolutely amazing in that sense. Now, that said, again, it is heavy on the science, so I wouldn't recommend using it as an educational tool until you're at like sort of the high school or maybe undergraduate college level, because that's really where you would start to learn about this heavier science aspect. But that said, there is a lot of little factual tidbits that you can pick up by simply playing this game. Now, as far as cons are concerned, I already mentioned my biggest one, which is the science, and not everybody is interested in it. But other than that, the other major one for me is actually the lack of additional tracts. We've got 3 very major ones. We've got the gastrointestinal, we've got the respiratory, and then the general tissue one. But there are a lot of other ways that we as humans can get infections of all different sorts. And thankfully, the creators of this game are working on, whether it's expansions or stretch goals or whatever it happens to be able to get more tracks into this game for more routes of infection. And so I am very much looking forward to seeing how they do that. And not only is that going to add to the scientific value, but it's also going to add a great deal to the educational value for the game as well, which are both absolute wonders in my book. The other really big con for me is sort of the transitional periods from when you're going from just attacking the barrier decks to when you start using the immune response cards instead. As you saw, it can be a little bit jarring, it can be a little bit awkward, but really a lot of that can be mitigated by having somebody who really knows how to play, or reading through the rules a lot and really just knowing exactly what to do during that transitional phase can help a great deal. But all in all, overall, as far as the scientific aspect is concerned, it's actually really well done and fairly simplistic, all things considered. But that is my other really major con for this game. General conclusions, you guys might already guess. I've already gone over many of them. The game itself is great. I really, really enjoy it. It is a solid deck builder outside of the theme for it. Obviously, I do really, really enjoy the theme. It's a ton of fun. Just be careful with your gaming group. Make sure that this is something that they are all interested in, because again, the theme is really, really intertwined here, and it's very difficult to sort of remove yourself from it. That said, again, if you're looking for a good quality, versatile deck builder that you can learn a little bit from and is also a little bit different from what's on the shelves already, make sure that you take a look at Pathogenesis. It hits Kickstarter on September 28th. It goes on the shelf, so to speak. So be sure to look at the Kickstarter page, check out all of the details for yourself. But with that, thank you so very much for watching this video. As always, please put any and all thoughts into the comments below, and I will see you next time.
Thank you again, everyone, for watching my Kickstarter preview for Pathogenesis. As I mentioned before, this is the most scientifically complex and accurate game that I have ever played, and I would love to hear what you guys have to think about it as well as this video. Please leave any and all thoughts in the comments below, as always. In addition, make sure that you check out the Kickstarter starting on September 28th. As always, I've got several of my playlists linked up at the top of the page so that you can see some more of my work, and if you want, you can see more of me in the future by clicking on that big giant subscribe button. With that, thank you so very much again, and I will see you next time.